is a former U.S. national security advisor.
Qatar has emerged from, under the previous emir, from being a relatively obscure, minor player to a position of preeminence.
Juan Zarate is the former deputy national security advisor for combating terrorism.
What you have is the resurrection of charitable networks that had been suppressed post 9/11, but that are being reborn in the context of Syria.
So how big of a player is Qatar?
Qatar is at the center of this. Qatar has now taken its place in the lead of countries that are supporting al-Qaeda and al-Qaeda-related groups.
So how high up in the government in Qatar does the support for Islamic extremism for these al-Qaeda-linked groups go?
Well, these are decisions made at the top. And so Qatar operates as a monarchy. Its officials, its activities follow the orders of the government. And to the extent that there is a policy of supporting extremists in the region, that's a policy that comes from the top.
They probably are a little bit more towards, supporting people that we are a little bit less than thrilled with.
There's no question that money going to al-Qaeda affiliates and groups hurts the United States. Money coming out of Qatar not only allows these groups to grow in strength on the battlefield in Syria, but allows them the possibility, the budget, to imagine plotting and to actually attack the United States and the West.
It's well known in national security circles, but not by the American people. The fact is, when I ask, follow the money is the old adage. When I ask about terrorist financing, where's the money coming from that's funding these Sunni extremist terrorist organizations, al-Qaeda? Every time it's the Gulf. Comes out of the Gulf, and the worst offender is Qatar. They give money indiscriminately, and I think it's a real problem. I just returned from the region. I was in UAE and also Saudi, visited with the Crown Prince. They threatened to pull their diplomats out of Qatar because of the money that they're throwing into the Syrian rebels, which in turn are funding al-Nusra and ISIS, which are the very enemy that we should be fighting in Iraq.
So what I'm trying to understand, Chairman, and I wonder if you can help me a bit, because, we talked about the U.S. companies. They have obviously significant exposure in Qatar. There's also an air base there, which is a very significant base for this country. You heard our guest talk about it in the piece, but the #1 supply location for the military, 6,000 U.S. Air Force members are located there. It is a $400 million annual budget. Even Saudi Arabia, an ally of the United States, does not allow such a base to be in that country. Is this why the United States finds it okay to have these funding activities going on in an ally?
Well, it's a very strange relationship. I think we want to keep them in the tent as much as we can. They do allow intelligence sharing like the Saudis do. But at the same time, you have these wealthy donors, these families that give money. And if you go back to the time of bin Laden and 9/11, the Qataris were giving to al-Qaeda. This concerns me when you look at the prisoner swap of the Taliban 5, one of whom was involved with 9/11 with bin Laden, right. And the other are the top 5 cabinets of Mullah Omar. We're going to send them to Qatar. That raises some really serious questions in terms of our national security.
The question, Chairman, that I have for you, actually, one of our other guests in the piece said, Juan Zarate, who formerly was in charge of fighting counterterrorism finance, he says that money coming out of Qatar could end up being used to fuel the ambition, the dream of attacks against the United States directly. Do you agree?
Well, I do agree with that, because if you look at the #1 threat to the homeland, it's ISIS in Syria and Iraq. It's the biggest training ground, surpassing Afghanistan and Pakistan. And who is funding ISIS? Who is funding al-Nusra? But more importantly, ISIS. That money, and the reason why the Saudis and UAE cracked down on Qatar is because they're the ones throwing the money indiscriminately, not caring who it goes to, as long as it funds Sunni extremists fighting Assad in Syria.